All right, Dr. E. I'm a kindergarten teacher with a student with SM. They whisper answers yet talk at full volume while playing on the playground. I use basic signs with all my students, including this student with SM. I've seen the student use the signs unprompted on a few occasions. Is this something that's okay to do, or should we push for accommodations or interventions?
Brandon, that's a really interesting question. I'm not a real advocate of using signs. In certain situations, I will use sign language as a basic thumbs up, thumbs down means of communication for a young child, especially to make their needs known, and a basic accommodation within the school setting if they're not able to use transitional or verbal strategies. In this particular case, you are using sign language for all the children. Something that's really important is that we don't want to set this child up to be different. So we certainly don't want to tell the child you can't use signs. However, you are using signs. Since this child is whispering, which is a very quiet voice, that's an indication to me that they are in the verbal stage. Their quiet voice is due to a few reasons. Number one, they don't have the social comfort, the confidence, and the verbal comfort in a larger group. Perhaps they're a sensory child and they are overwhelmed, they aren't as comfortable, and their voice goes down. The louder, the larger, the more people in an environment, especially if they aren't comfortable with the majority of individuals, the child will speak in a whisper mode. My guess is on the playground, that child is playing around with their friends and they're just kind of losing themselves and just kind of getting out there. Also, if they're not confident in your asking academic based questions, sometimes voice volume will go down. So there's the answer to the whispering. So we have to work on that. But as far as the sign language goes, I'm just really cautious with trying to tell this child not to do it. But here's what I would do. If you know the child can answer verbally and they use sign language, repeat the question to help them stay verbal. For example, rather than ask yes no questions where the child can do a thumbs up or a thumbs down, perhaps say, do you want the red or the blue? That's really hard to sign unless you're teaching them each letter of the alphabet. And even then, you can say, well, is that red or blue? And try to keep them in the verbal stage, even by writing it out, red or blue. So you're actually using strategies to bridge them up into verbal.
So, this might not be an SM related question or follow up, but why is this teacher using signs with her students?
Actually, that's a very insightful question. I'm really not sure. It's possible that this teacher just, maybe there's a child that's deaf in the classroom. So
Mhm.
the teacher's trying to be all inclusive. The other thing is maybe this teacher was taught that for a child with SM, that using sign language is a very viable way for communication. And so the teacher did that out of the kindness and also to help that child participate and not make them stand out. So it's probably one of those two reasons. However, as I said at the very start of this question, I'm not a huge advocate for this very reason that it gives these children a means of staying nonverbal. In other words, if she's saying sign language in terms of thumbs up, thumbs down, that doesn't bother me if they're trying to make their need known. But if you're literally teaching them sign language to communicate nonverbally consistently, I am not an advocate of that at all. And it
Mhm.
usually, for many kids, keeps them in the nonverbal stage of communication.
Right. It's like avoiding almost.
It's just keeping them there. One thing that is really important to understand is that, yes, the bridge is something to know and understand, but we're not trying to keep a child nonverbal. The bridge allows us to know where that child's baseline is, but we're always working on trying to help that child bridge into verbal communication. We're using strategies, intervention, we're setting up the room, the buddy process, the small groups in the room, the small groups out of the room, teaching teachers specifically how to question, when to question, where to question. Various strategies, use the visuals, choices, direct, write and read. I mean, it's really a recipe for every single child, Brandon. And
Mhm.
so using nonverbal communication is an accommodation. To me, it's not an intervention, unless that child's a shutdown child. So the next step of an intervention is helping them become nonverbal, but that's not what's happening in this particular case.
Are the use of signs on the bridge? Is that part of the bridge?
Well, signs in terms of thumbs up, thumbs down, nodding, pointing, gesturing, writing, that's nonverbal. So that's
Hmm.
stage one. So if a teacher says, "Do you want to go to the bathroom?" and the child is nodding, believe it or not, that's a stage one because the child is responding in a nonverbal means. If the teacher says, "Do you want red or blue?" and the child's not able to say it or use an intermediary in that particular situation, or sounds to words, whatever strategy, a transitional strategy that teacher may be using. And the teacher says, "Do you want red or blue?" And the child points to the red, that's nonverbal. That's stage one. If the child writes it and shows it, that's stage one. So that's responding, stage 1A. We do
Okay.
work on initiation, like stage 1B, where maybe we have a goal or a game that the child comes up and lets the teacher know it's time for recess or time for lunch, or they're playing games. I had a child the other day that we were working on nonverbal initiation. They weren't able to be verbal, but they were getting comfortable nonverbally in the session. I wrote the word go on a piece of paper. So when he was playing games with one of my supporting clinicians, and it was that clinician's turn to go with the game, the child pointed to go so that the child was non-verbally stage 1B initiating. So you actually have to teach these kids, believe it or not, for many of them to be nonverbal initiative or even verbally initiative. You can't just wait for these things to happen. The teachers have to ask questions. "Hey, Robbie, would you go up and give this math book to Sarah?" That's nonverbal initiation, stage 1B. By teachers prompting, facilitating. One of my favorite statements is "don't wait, facilitate." The teachers have to, the parents have to provide the interventions to help this child bridge up. Now, a bridge is not stepwise. It's not like you have to just master that one stage. You can there's many kids that are nonverbal or building nonverbal skills. As soon as I ask a question, "Do you want red or blue?" for example, and I write it down, there's children that might read red. So it's not a linear situation. It's an awareness and knowing what strategies work for that particular child.